The narcissist, the golden child, and the scapegoat. I've referenced in previous videos the relationship that the government or the establishment, the empire, whatever you want to call it, the relationship that that system has with the people is this parenting type of relationship. Well, where they provide you your freedom, they provide you your resources, they build the roads, they give you your education, they give you your food, they dam up the rivers to give you your water. And you're supposed to feel some sort of gratitude for this. You are forced into feeling this connection. You're forced into feeling this familial connection with the origins of the establishment. So you're forced to feel this connection to Christopher Columbus by having a Christopher Columbus Day. You're forced into Christianity by having Easter, Christmas, and all of these other narcissistic parent control measures. So these are for people who know what I'm talking about when I reference the narcissist, the golden child, and the scapegoat. There's also something in this psychological whirlpool called the flying monkeys. And the flying monkeys act as drones for the narcissistic parent or whatever it's called. These flying monkeys can be seen as the police department, the education system, even the conspiracy theorists like the TYTs, the mainstream media. Definitely, these are the flying monkeys of the narcissistic consciousness, this colonial narcissistic consciousness that has had a grip on the whole of consciousness for however many hundreds of years now. You want to call it, it's grown. So there's no real starting point there, but it does exist. So you have the flying monkeys, which are the thought processes. They are the mechanisms that are used to reinforce the narcissistic belief systems and the narcissistic control measures and the narcissistic, more specifically, the narcissistic control supply. So in a narcissistic parenting relationship, the children are sources of narcissistic supply. In society, the source of narcissistic supply, the people are the supply. The institutions that the people feed into are the supply, the narcissistic supply for the narcissistic dictator, the narcissistic identity. So this is all going into the blueprints of the mind control that I've been referencing in the last few years now. I've only just recently come about this information specifically. One of the videos just popped up on YouTube it was from a channel called New Mindframe. I've shared in a community post one of her videos. I shared one of her videos. I've also shared her channel on my channel too, so you can go click on it, and if you can't go through the community post, and you can find her channel, new _ I think it's an underscore, but if you just type in new NU and then Mindframe, all one word, the new is NU space and then Mindframe, one word, you'll see her videos. Amazing work she's doing. Highly recommend checking out her channel. But for more information going into this narcissistic parent relationship, specifically, I would say go check her channel out and show some support over there. But for this video, I wanted to take that observation and expand it to the narcissistic dictatorship of colonialism. My personal interactions with the narcissistic parent do exist. I was a scapegoat in my family. My brother was the golden child, and my little sister was the what they call the lost one. These are all very kind of loose interpretations or how we fit in that picture, but because the narcissistic parent did bounce back and forth in order to maintain the narcissistic supply. But overall, definitely I was a scapegoat. When I went off into the military, there was this hatred that against me that was created because the family dynamic was completely broken, in a sense that a lot of the responsibilities that I had taken on, which was the majority in the home, a lot of those responsibilities were attempted to be forced onto my younger brother and sister, but there was no real sense of authority there because her relationship with us was a controlling relationship. It wasn't really out of a natural sort of familial respect. It was an authoritative control measure. So naturally, when I left the picture, there was this explosion between the family members that turned into creating a new family dynamic where I wasn't really in the picture. And this family dynamic involved, instead of a parent-child relationship that couldn't exist anymore, because in many cases I was more of the parent than the parents, because the responsibility of the home life was largely put on me. There was the enabler, which was my stepfather, mostly because he just wasn't present. He didn't know what to do or how to interact. And my mother was the strong force. She was the main one, and it was kind of like an undercover narcissistic, to where it wasn't open. It was very slick. It was very like subtle manipulation. So that whole thing went on. When I left the picture at 17, as soon as I had the opportunity to get out of that situation, I was gone, because subconsciously I was very much aware of that situation. Being the scapegoat, you're very aware of what's going on, and I was out of there as soon as possible. That gave my mother and stepfather the opportunity to finally get engaged. That's how I was seeing it. I felt I had a family meeting with, it wasn't really a family meeting, it was just kind of like a forced full discussion with my mother right before the day before I went into the army, pretty much telling her how she didn't express love. She was raised in a big family, a huge family, with a lot of kids in the house, and she was the one that ran away. She escaped, and she was successful, extremely smart, very like dialed into the world. But being dialed into the world is not a good thing. So when you get into that space and find a sense of pride in that, you start to adopt the frequencies of what you are now trying to be like. So she had to look towards success in society from running away from the family as a source of, to get a sense of accomplishment or a sense of achievement, because in her family, she was a scapegoat. So in order to get any kind of respect from her family member, in order to get any sort of respect from her family, she had to be successful, the same kind of success that her parents did. So she did that. She had me, she had a job, she had her own home, and she met the love of her life, had a family, which was my little brother and sister, and boom, when all of us went on about our lives. It's basically like the Cliff Notes of what went down. But the nuts and bolts of that relationship was very, there's a lot of different words. It's just unhealthy, very unhealthy. The situation was an extremely unhealthy relationship. There was a distant father figure that was present, which is sometimes worse. A distant father figure and a controlling, manipulative, narcissistic mother figure. The responsibilities in the home were on to the scapegoat and the peacekeeper. So I had to take on the scapegoat and the peacekeeper because in the home, the disciplinary actions, usually the disciplinary function usually was put onto me after I was broken. So before that, so the disciplinary function was placed on me as the older child, the same way the disciplinary function was put on their older siblings in their families. So our parents are just raising their children the same way that their parents raised them, and their parents raised the majority of their children in a fucked up manner. So this is why things are the way they are on a micro scale and on a macro scale. And we can't place a lot of these things to where they need to go because there's a sense of pride in the mother being a mother, the father being a father, you know, America being America. You know, there's this pride that's there, and there's no real sense of reasons why. There's just to celebrate this. So this goes in, this is basically the nuts and bolts of why the sandcastle empire needs to be consistently reinforced into your reality on a not only a daily basis but a momentary basis. So on and every day, every moment of the day, there's something that reinforces you being attached to this narcissistic reality. You can look at the mainstream media, the education system, the drive to be, or the push to be successful. The food makes you codependent. So in the narcissistic family relationship, the food relationship that people have with within the narcissistic family is a sense of narcissistic supply, because the children or the people weigh themselves down. That creates a codependent relationship with the parental figures or the narcissistic parents. Their source of energy to keep the children close is food that fills their body up but doesn't fill their inner bodies up. There's no nutrients, even on the physical, psychological, or spiritual. There's no natural, organic kind of connection there. But just like you can go to a McDonald's and live off McDonald's your entire life, the education system acts as a sense of narcissistic fuel or narcissistic supply for the narcissistic power, the controllers, by having something to look forward to. So like I've been saying in previous videos, this system is about stealing your time. And a way to see what that means on a deeper level is that what I was saying is that your consciousness, your time is precious. But that's just an explanation of something that's obvious. In a psychological perspective, the time that's within that the time that is stolen in that relationship is not just stolen just because they're bad people or whatever it is. It's a sense of fuel. It's a supply. So the way things are in society are the way things are in society are that way on purpose, because that chaos, that dysfunction in society acts as a supply for the controllers. It not only acts as a supply, but it also acts as a measure of higher than. So you can see, like, just as the parents might not even be shit, but they are some kind of shit because they are higher than the child. So they are a parent. This is why I've been breaking down in these previous videos, this pride shit in being a mother and father ain't shit, because there's no real definitions there. The same way there's no real definitions of love. There's no substance there. It's just a thing. So how the fuck are you proud of just having sex and popping a baby out? Like, there's nothing to be proud there. But look at the mainstream media. Look at the glorification of parenthood. There's no glorification of being a great parent, to be a knowledgeable parent. There's nothing there. So that means there's a reason behind why parenting is promoted in society. Another thing is that the narcissistic control government needs to, I've referenced this in previous videos, the king and the queen. So the household function acts as a microcosm of the macrocosm that is the king and the queen over the masses. I've said this in previous videos. I can't actually say which videos it was, but I remember saying it a lot. But it was really refreshing to see this broken down from a psychological perspective, and I hadn't even really done any of the research to figure it out. Like, I hadn't heard about the golden child, the scapegoat, and the lost one ever until last night, really. But I knew that there was something there. I had the observation, but I didn't have the names of what it was until just last night. So the family dynamics become, the family dynamics become a carbon copy of the relationship that government has with the masses overall. This function goes throughout society. It's pumped throughout society through the mainstream media. So that constant inundation of, be like this person, dress like this, wear this, have this job, get this education, go here, do this, have this family, raise your children like this, celebrate this holiday, educate yourself like this, think about the universe like this. The list goes on and on and on. The point is, it's easier to have people blind to their mind controls if they look exactly like the mind controller, if they act and feel and pride themselves in what the mind controllers pride themselves in and with. So this is why the so-called white person, because like I've said, white and blackness don't exist. This is a control measure. So in the narcissistic governmental family, the white people are the golden children, whereas the black people are the black sheep or the scapegoats. This includes all non-white people, by the way, but specifically the main child of this narcissistic governmental family, the main black sheep, the main scapegoat, are the darkest of the dark. So all the scapegoats of the world are the non-white people. They are the problems. We are the problems that the parental figures of the colonial establishment need to take care of. So this is why they need to label the whole world as third world and you as first world, or them as first world, and the rest of the world is a third world country. This is to express their dominance and their, take it a step even further into the scientific interpretation of you know, how they break this stuff down. There's a pride in the way this system came to be. So all of the destroying, the enslavement, the bombing, the genocide that led up to the establishment of today, it can never be acknowledged, because it's the same way that a parent can never acknowledge the golden child, scapegoat, lost one, flying monkeys situation. They will lose everything. They will lose their supply grid. They will lose their control. They will lose their power. Every part of their narcissistic governmental family will come crashing down if the Native American story is spoken on, if the indigenous peoples of the world is spoken on. Any deep kind of truth, the same way any deep kind of truth or observation that goes on in the family can bring about a breakdown of the narcissistic control grid, the same way that happens on a micro scale in the family, the same thing happens on a macro scale in society with the establishment and the peoples as a whole. I don't really have to go into much detail about this. Once you start realizing, once you do the research on the scapegoat, the golden child, and the lost one, you'll start to see more so exactly what I've been speaking about for the last, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years now. I just didn't have the words to break it down, but now there's a reference point that people can see this from a psychological perspective. Like, people need accreditation. They need all that shit. Like, some people do. Not everybody needs that accreditation sort of, you know, oh, that's okay. Like, he must know what he's talking about. Some people need that. People who still have an internal receptor for feeling and everything, they don't really need that. They don't need, like, if somebody tells me something and I can see, like, I know and I can understand and understand where they're coming from, you already know that. But there's something in the narcissistic family relationship on a massive scale that tells people that you can only trust people when they have this degree, this diploma, this such and such and such and such. So that is also another supply. That relationship that people have with intelligence is a supply chain, a narcissistic supply energy grid that is everlasting, pretty much. It'll just keep going on. So the public education system is a source of narcissistic supply. The dominance, the beating down of non-white people in society around the world is a way of maintaining as little amount of narcissistic injury, because once so-called non-white people speak up about their situation, that very act creates narcissistic injury to the controllers. So this is why the story needs to be the story of the narcissistic parent, or the story of the narcissistic empire, needs to be reinforced on a daily basis, on a annual basis. They need to constantly tell you, this is your story. This is what you need to be proud of. This is evolution. This is how it is. There's nothing else. If you say something else, you'll be excluded. You'll be discarded. You'll be the scapegoat of the scapegoats. So this is what conspiracy theorists are. So the main reason the scapegoat is because the scapegoat brings about this, is because the scapegoat creates a sense of vulnerability in the entire establishment, because they become the scapegoat because they don't take the shit from the controllers. So in order to maintain control, there needs to be a buildup of something, something to be proud of. Look at this child, this golden child. Like these are the white people of society. Look at these fucking golden children. They are so fucking successful. They've, built Tesla and Apple and Microsoft and, all this shit that they put out every day. I heard somebody on the plane talking about they named their child Tesla or something. So yeah, the golden children need to be built up. So as long as there's a golden child, that information, that relationship is used to discredit all of the information that the scapegoat brought to the surface. So because there are successful white people, that validates that there are unsuccessful black people. That because white people have done it on their own, right? Like the parents are putting that out there. They put that atmosphere of, pull your fucking bootstraps and get out there and do it like us. Motherfucker, you do shit out there. Like you've been the fucking, so everybody can see this. Everybody sees this relationship. So, but what happens is people are now starting to create alliances in the family relationship. Or what happened in my family relationship, there was an alliance that was created between the scapegoat and the golden child. My sister was a little bit younger, and she was still there and still around there, but she needed a little more time to do her work on her own, whereas my brother and I were very, very close. So everything that we were talking about and observing in reality was dealt with us. So we had to go through the interpretation of what was going on, and how we figured out what was going on was to put the pieces together of seeing that nothing that our parents was doing was because there were bad people. What was happening is that they were just repeating the patterns that their parents did to them, and their parents did what they did to them on a largely a more destructive scale. So really their best case scenario is to just repeat the patterns that their parents did. And this is what's, the best case scenario is for society. And we could see there was no real kind of parental energies there in our family, because most of the time when you're coming up in a struggling family, the parents are not there. They're constantly working. They got to raise children. They're still growing themselves. So any kind of growth really comes to a halt because the main focus is of survival, this whole and in the meantime, after survival, you have to maintain some kind of family relationship, so society has put out there movies, entertainment. Today's version of that is social media. Social media maintains the white noise while the family dynamic continues to get worse. So this is why I said it's all about how your time is stolen. Your time is stolen, and in that time being stolen, the narcissistic power grid is being filled up. So the internet is a narcissistic supply chain for the narcissistic government control grid. So when my brother and I started to create an alliance, so how this alliance was created was right after I went to the right after I graduated from high school, I went straight into the Army. Wasn't even 18 yet. 4 years in the Army, got out, came back home, got a job immediately, started working. There was nothing in my life that had any fulfillment. My relationship was the only thing that filled me up with any kind of love, but I didn't have the love that I needed. I didn't have the internal blueprints of, I didn't know how to love my girlfriend at the time and her daughter. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew I wanted to know what I was doing, but at the same time, I also knew that there was things that needed to be done. There was nothing, the only thing that was in that relationship was that it felt good. It felt like natural. Everything was cool. But relationships are deeper than just a feeling. There needs to be an intelligence there. The way I was raised was of no intelligence of any kind of family. And it was all survival. It was just like, make what you can. So, yeah, there was no guidance or anything. So I escaped. I ran away. I went back into the Army. I spent 3 years in there. 1 year into my 3-year tour, I started to unveil a lot of the information about the government, and that was my so-called awakening in 2008. And I still had 2 years left in the Army. I was done. I was getting ready to go AWOL, and but I didn't. I stayed there. I was like, okay, well, I know I don't know anything. This is brand new to me. Let me get out of my emotions real quick and try to figure out what's going on and just utilize this time for my benefit, or to learn more. So I did. So I stayed there. I taught myself. I taught my soldiers. I taught, whoever would, or shared information with whoever, was open to it. And then I got out, went back into the military. This is 2010. Went back into, or not went in the military. Funny I said that. Went back into the school system, which is, that time I was in the Cal State system, and I was an English major. So that was like the pinnacle for me. Like, oh, I've always wanted to be an English major. So because I was a writer. Quickly realized the authoritarian dominant, the control measures of the university system was just a carbon copy of the military. As soon as I realized that, I was gone. Right when I jumped out of that system, the Occupy movement started up. So I was right in protesting the establishment itself. Again, at that time, still didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But there was a feeling there. It was like, fuck that. This needs to be said. All this stuff is going on. And so all that time was about a year and a half, yelling and looking around and pointing the fingers, never really knowing what the hell is going on. But that needed to be done. So I started unknowingly at that time my own personal journey, my journey of expansion and, whatever you want to call it, unveiling, my consciousness or whatever, awakening my consciousness, whatever it is. It's always to some degree, though. That's the whole thing. When people say that stuff, it's not like a thing, like a golden egg or something. It's an everlasting thing. You awaken your consciousness here. Is that so? If you can understand that you can awaken your consciousness in another realm, then the one in this realm really doesn't matter because it's equal to the other ones. So if that's the case, if there's a macro expanding of consciousness, then the micro expanding of consciousness is nothing to be like proud of or to be celebrating and all this other stuff. Just realizes it's an everlasting journey and go on about it. If you start to do that stuff, it will create this egotistical, narcissistic relationship with the evolution or the expansion or the awakening of consciousness, which is what the New Age community is doing today, which is why the New Age community is being backed by the narcissistic government. The narcissistic government needs to control the awakening of the golden child, the scapegoat, and the lost child. So the New Age community is being developed to control that awakening and further manipulate the supply, to further manipulate the supply, the narcissistic supply chain through another source. So before it was as of now, some of the narcissistic supply chain energy is coming from the education system, the government, the food industry, the prescription drug, the medical industry, but also the mainstream religious programs. So how religions soak up the narcissistic supply from the masses of people who funnel their energy into those systems. The same way that breaks down all of the energy is the same way that the New Age community is breaking down that energy and is going to break down that energy. So the New Age is just going to be this universal version of the way Christianity has dominated and is dominating these spiritual interpretations of reality around the world. The reasons why you have a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus in your home is to reinforce the narcissistic parental figure. Not only the narcissistic parental figure, but the narcissistic parental characters. Because the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus is not only a figurehead for the narcissistic parent, the overlord, the controller, but also represents the narcissistic child, Jesus. Jesus is the narcissistic golden child that can do no wrong. You can never say anything about that golden child, because that golden child is a manifestation of the godly nature of this realm itself through the eyes of who? The narcissistic parental control group. So, or the establishment that uses that control measure. The thing with the Jesus program is that the Jesus not only represents the father figure, but Jesus also represents the golden child. So the child that can do no wrong, the parent that can do no wrong, twice separates a non-white person from any kind of empowerment, from any kind of self-love. You're born into self-hatred when the God looks nothing like you. The God of this realm looks nothing like you. You can't see yourself in the highest form of reality. The same kind of effect that happens when you cannot see yourself. The reasons why there are a majority of so-called white people teaching non-white students in public education system. It's a sense of dominance, of control, intellectual authority. We're teaching you. What's happening is that the students are thinking subconsciously they need to be there because they're smarter. Science has, you hear white supremacists say this all the time. Chinese people or Asian people are smarter than white people, and white people are smarter than black people. It's a joke in society. The smart Asian kid and the goofy sort of athletic black and white kids, but the white kid is successful in society and all this other stuff, and the black people are just athletes, and get the fuck out of here. Go play some basketball or music or some shit, and go be the scapegoat. Go do some crime on the streets or some shit. It's a joke in society, and those jokes, that atmosphere is another source of narcissistic supply. So the children of the golden children of the narcissistic parental units feel a sense of higher than accomplishment. They feel a sense of they feel their roles when the golden child, the white golden child in society can fill their role more easily when the scapegoats of society are more scapegoaty. So in the mainstream consciousness, this is why you have to have the robbers and the thieves. This is why Trump was talking about, Mexicans are rapists and, they're going to rob you and do all this other shit. And then you have black people on television robbing people and doing all this, shooting each other, shooting other people. And this is another reason why the golden child cannot have the white people doing all these mass shootings. The mainstream media can't say, that there's a trend of white men who are doing this. So the golden child having a short circuit and going and fucking shooting up people is largely, and it being connected to white supremacy, is connected to this narcissistic identity that has manifested through the soul, like as God. Like they are the gods that can mass destroy other souls with a weapon because they have been empowered by the narcissistic control grid that is the establishment itself. So a mass shooter, a white boy mass shooter that goes out there and shoots all these people, he can do that because in his eyes, he's God. Not only that, but he's reinforced by society as being God when the society itself doesn't reference the individual. So this is what's happening. The individual is, so the individual that I'm talking about is the golden child tagline itself. So that not referencing is what gives these individuals this sense of authority, this sense of I'm better than you. So on a massive scale, mass shootings is what this comes to be. How mass shootings is how that godly mind control manifests into reality. Whereas on a smaller scale, it's just kind of like this internal white supremacy. They think they're better than you, but they won't say anything. Like on the lowest scale, they'll act like they're your friends, but they still think like, we're better than you people. We're better than you. So they have that whole thing in there. On an extreme scale, somebody's so sick in the head, he's gonna say, I'm so better than them, I'm gonna get an automatic weapon and go fucking kill all these people. So that's part of the reason, what's happening. But the real breakdown is coming from the relationship, the internal relationship that isn't really allowed to go into the internal spaces. Really, people don't have internal relationships. People have external internal relationships. You can't have an internal relationship in a narcissistic relationship or in a narcissistic family dynamic. You can only have the labels that the authority figures have placed upon you. So this is why there's no real substance to people or individuals anymore. It's all about who you are. You're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're a super conservative, you're a progressive, aggressive progressive. It's all about jumping onto some kind of group, some kind of big group that's accepted by the parents. This is what's going on right now. So this is why politics is such a big thing, is because what's happening is that you have all of these children that are being influenced by the rebellious children now, who are the conspiracy theorists in the eyes. So now the scapegoats are right now creating an alliance consciously with each other and unveiling this narcissistic control grid on a macro scale. Since that is being revealed, the narcissistic parents need to create more control grids. So they created the aggressive progressives. They created the progressives. They created TYT and all these alternative news sources. This is to create more spaces for people to fill, more spaces to fill themselves up at the same time, externally and internally. Because right now you have, once you look into and break down the golden child, the lost child, and the scapegoat, you'll see that there's no real identity with these individuals. The identity comes from what the parents or the control measures have done to them. But once you escape that, the game is over. So what happened in my family is that I went off on, let me go back to let me go back to my storyline. I got off on that tangent. So what happened was, after school, after Occupy, I realized that I was, fighting the psychological warfare. Still didn't even know what it was, because this is psychological warfare mostly, and I didn't even know about this stuff. By the words, by the verbiage of it, but I knew the experience. I could verbalize it, but I didn't know the words of it. So the psychological warfare was largely what I was doing or unveiling when I was in the Occupy interactions with reality. I had no awareness of a spiritual warfare. So unveiling the psychological warfare helped me get into the space of a spiritual warfare, seeing how that exists. Basically freeing your psyche, then freeing your spirit from its own confines. So when you get into the spiritual warfare, you're pretty much on your own. You are on your own unless you choose not to be. So this is the thing with the New Age community. A lot of people don't want to be on their own. So this is why it's beneficial for them to be in a New Age community. And why it's beneficial for the system to create a New Age community, because they know people are escaping this broken family dynamic. They're going to need some place to go. The New Age community is this utopian welcoming grid. Oh, come in. It's so nice over here. It's so beautiful. You see what I'm saying? So that is why this is beneficial to the system. This is why you have Marianne Williamson, talking about love is the answer, and she's going to answer. You have another golden child out there fixing the whole fucking world. So when I went on my spiritual journey, after leaving the psychological warfare, I started to heal a lot of the systems that I wasn't even aware were there. I didn't even know this stuff existed. And it was a personal journey. I was doing this on my own. After a few years had passed, my little brother was like, "What the fuck are you doing, man?" That's like, in his own way, he was like, this was his words too, whatever you're doing out there by yourself, because I did a lot of my personal internal work in Sedona. Just the location, because the location is dialed in, but the actual, community and it's really shit. It's garbage. It's turning into Disneyland. But the land itself, the energy of the land itself, the indigenous people who were here, they knew, they were dialed in. There's something here. But this is why the mainstream consciousness has to build over it so much. They have to build over these sacred energy grounds, because they have to place their power, their narcissistic power, on top of the natural power. So my brother was like, whatever you're doing out there for you, because he could see the changes in me. I wasn't as angry anymore. I had a lot of answers that were not fix-a-flat answers. They were real fucking answers. They were like, oh yeah, like this is where this stuff comes from. Answers that, our parents never had, and even school systems never had. And a lot of the answers that I had for myself were beneficial for my brother and sister too. But it has to be in their own time. So my brother is very, very smart and very dialed in. We're really close, because he's passed now. So he asked me, he was like, what, over time, in his own way, like I said, he was asking me like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, how are you doing this? And he basically told me, come back home and do this. So I did. And I left Sedona, I went back, I slept on the floor at the house for a year and a half. And, just helped my brother out, because he was the only one that was open to what was doing it. And it was also helping and healing me at the same time too. So that was the alliance. That was like we're not, we never really fought. We always had this big brother, little brother sort of thing. And it went to this extreme to where, my mother and really kind of pinned us together in her own manipulative way because of the dynamics of that she was trying to control in the family. But it was never real. Like, we grew out of it because, we're both cool people. We were, like, my little brother, he was extremely smart. Like, I'm pretty smart. So emotional manipulative shit was really kind of already known, if not subconsciously, even when we were kids. So another thing was, in a narcissistic family, there is a closeness that can happen because the closeness becomes an escape. So the movies were an escape that we had in our family that actually made us closer. It's sick and ridiculous, but you can see how that can make you closer. But you can also see how that can make you sick, because you can start to hate yourself by downloading all the belief systems of the movie realm. So overall, for the most part, we were close. And I always had this relationship with my family to where I was almost like a third parent. Like, I was responsible for a lot of the discipline, responsible for a lot of the parental things that went on in the home, because I was always in the home and I could always do a lot of this stuff. Like, I was, making bottles, like baby bottles, like the actual bottles that the old school ones, you get the little plastic little baggie and then you had to wrap it around the top. You had to boil those bottle nipples and all that shit. Like, I was doing that shit in the 90s when I was, how old was I? Like 8 years old. Just, having responsibilities at a very young age, and responsibilities even before that I won't get into, even before my brother and sister were born. Like, that's how deep my relationship goes with this whole broken shit. It's fucked up. So having gotten out of that, and then for the most part, and then now coming back and helping my brother get out of that for the most part, created this alliance. And it was extremely healthy, and we started to help our sister with, what was going on, and even our parents, to the degree that they, were open to. So we ended up having a family meeting. We started discussing a lot of the things that were going on. I was the one who called the meeting, and I just created an open space for us to speak, because we never spoke about, all the things that needed to be spoken on. And it was very healing. It made us closer. The same way when I went into the military the first time, I told my family, you need to be closer. There's no real love here. It's basically a babysitter family. We didn't really have parents. To take it to the extreme, we didn't have parents, and it's not really extreme to say that. We had babysitters. A lot of other people can understand that too. Like, just imagine having like a really cool, close babysitter. That's basically all it was. There's no guidance. There's no wisdom there. It was just make sure the kids, have food, water, shelter, they're safe. They take care of, they do their homework and all this. That's basically it. It's a babysitter. So a lot of the wounds that we needed to heal, our parents also needed to heal and need to heal. But in that situation, a lot of that stuff came to the surface, and, we dealt with it because to the degree that we could, because this goes really deep. Like, your parents need fucking therapy. Like, if any of this stuff is vibing, like if you hear where I'm coming from, your fucking parents probably need a lot of therapy dealing with this shit. And maybe you do as well too. But so the spiritual relationship was key. It was the key that was needed after the psychological warfare was unveiled. My brother and I created this alliance. We started healing ourselves, healing each other within the family, and like less than a month after that, he was killed. So this was in 2015. So really, like a few weeks before he passed, he had got to speak about and share a lot of his feelings and let go of a lot of this stuff, which was a really extreme blessing. So when he passed, everything was just like it was like reset. Everything was resetted. Everything was like brought back over again. And when you're dealing with narcissistic people or tendencies, there's the escape mechanism there is just ridiculous. So a lot of the work that was done in sort of healing before any of this stuff happened kind of just gets pushed to the side or thrown away. And then, you know, what's dealt with is what's happening, like what's going on right now. So, which needs to be done. The side effect to that is that deeper work gets put to the side because enabling and a lot of other shit gets pulled to the forefront. And that could be the ongoing process, but it's up to the individuals. So it happens naturally in the beginning because that's the only thing you know. And something traumatic like that, there's nothing you can do. And the only thing you can really do is go to that which is comfortable. And so that's the narcissistic family was the only thing that we knew. So that happened. And I became the scapegoat again. This was about, right before I left, right before I left, 10 months in, the narcissistic parental family member stuff came back up, and I was a scapegoat, and my sister assumed the golden child now. And what happened was, I was in the house, grieving with my family and trying to help my family grieve and do what they were doing. In that grieving process, a narcissistic person is not going to... See, this is what happens when you have narcissistic tendencies or you have a narcissistic way of life. You have a way of life for everything. So grief doesn't really happen naturally. Grief happens on a synthetic basis. There's like the Webster's definition of grief or grieving, and then there's the natural soul definition of grieving. For the most part, people are not allowed to have that soul grief because the narcissistic grief is the norm. So in that environment, my family members had a lot of narcissistic tendencies still going on, and I was observing their grieving process and seeing that there was some unhealthy things that were going on. And I wasn't cool with that. So I would voice my opinions on that because that's a destructive thing. And I wouldn't do that to myself, so I wouldn't allow my family to do that, so I'm going to speak up. This is the stuff that the scapegoat does. And this is why the scapegoat is a scapegoat, because the scapegoat threatens the energetic supply chain, the narcissistic supply chain for the narcissist. So when that happened, it started to, slowly but surely build itself up. And then eventually it was like, it was too much. So I had to leave again. I had to get out of there. I was basically forced out without words. With words. I was basically forced out of the house, where the new golden child, which was my sister, was teamed up with the victim, my mother now, who assumed the victim role. Obviously, she just lost her son. She wore that and used that experience to basically force me out of the picture in order to allow the new control grid to come back into being. Since the lost child, which was my sister, never really had a place in the golden child and the scapegoat relationship, once the golden child was no longer in their picture anymore, she assumed that position, even if she wasn't treated that way. And she's still not treated that way, because she's not treated as a golden child because my mother still... She's not treated as the golden child because our mother still has the control tendencies, the manipulative control tendencies. So it's like keeping you in your place, because that's how her parents, treated her and her siblings. So it's like keeping you in your place by always keeping you down. This is, classic cases for the narcissistic parent. So, but when she assumed the golden child position, it was beneficial to the narcissistic parent, because the narcissistic parent needs extra energy to remove the scapegoat from the situation. So she turned on the victim role against me, and then the security, which was the new golden child, came and reinforced it and said, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing to, our parents, or now my parents? What are you doing? Like, because she didn't know. She didn't know. All she saw was her mother being victimized by me, the victimizer, the one who, is responsible for all the fucked up shit in the world. All that shit came up in our discussions too. So that was a sense of power. The narcissistic parent was in that power seat and said nothing. She said nothing to deal with the situation, allowed it to happen, said, okay, basically without words, you need to leave, because those were the words that the golden child was speaking, because I was creating too much, stuff in the family dynamics, and that was seen as extra stuff, because the main stuff that needed to be focused on was what? Grieving. We just lost my brother, they lost his son. What's this dude with all this coming in here with all this talking about shit that needs to be talked about? What's all this deep stuff? No, we need to deal with, just be the victim for a while. We're all victims. Why don't you want to be a victim right now? See, I don't play that victim shit. So the family dynamics was, we're all victims. I'm like, no. Yes, something happened to all of us to where we have been placed in this victim seat. But that's not a healthy thing to wear. In a narcissistic parental family unit, a victim thing is very beneficial, because it's a supply. It's a supply for the entire grid. So I didn't fight it at all. I just left. I said, all right, well, I'll be back. I knew exactly what was going on. I was, hurt in that moment to see, to be basically kicked out of the family. Get out of the house. You're no longer welcome here now. You're causing more harm than you are any benefit. And in this moment in time where we're all healing, that needs to be. So our father figure in my stepfather in that situation, he plays the enabler. He just goes with the flow. So he didn't say anything. There was no kind of he just sat there and just held space for the controller. So yeah, it was basically like 3-on-1, get the fuck out. So I did. I left, and it was right. Yeah, I needed to leave because I needed to grieve on my own. I needed to do my own work. So I left. I went back to Sedona, and I had my own place, lived by myself for a while. Went back to school. That grounded me, but I was doing my own grieving. I was doing that work on my own. And things, while I was gone, things started to come back to a happy medium because the actual, like the big parts of the grieving process started to work their way into our lives on their own. So it was just like, all right, things are starting to get back to some kind of normality. But the situation still stands. You have a narcissistic, controlling family dynamic that is a microcosm of the macrocosm that is society. Now what? So my now what was to come back to the family and try to help them with what I helped my brother with, because they still hadn't really gotten there yet. Now, having seen the depths of the psychological breakdown, I'm more in a space of hands off now, even more so. It wasn't my responsibility before, and it's not my responsibility now. And it goes far beyond responsibility once you start to deal with the subconscious. When you're dealing with the subconscious, you're not dealing with conscious people. You're dealing with people who are largely unconsciously doing things or subconsciously doing things because they don't know what to do. They don't have anything else to do. So when you're bringing conscious information to individuals who are dealing with unconscious behaviors, you're not really going to get far with them. That's the work that needs to be done internally by the individual. And if they're in, especially a narcissistic relationship with themselves and other people, if you bring any kind of energy into that situation, you will be labeled as a scapegoat, and you will be fought. So once that starts to happen, that's when you need to find out, what space you need to be in. Largely, people pull back and allow things to allow the cards to lie where they may. But some people feel the need to get engaged a little more. I've been engaging for a while now, and now having understood this breakdown from a higher perspective, I can see how deep this goes and how this needs to be done on a mass scale, and largely even more so individually. So I really wanted to just share that with people now. There's so much more to this story involving like the family dynamics of this relationship that the micro has to the macro. But this is a good breakdown of how people can see what I'm talking about in reference to white supremacy and the dynamics of society as a whole right now. I use these terms like to share this information because these are reference points. A lot of the times people get in the comment section, they're going to do it today. People are going to be hating today on a lot of this other stuff because for whatever reason, but you can see that this is not about, this is far much deeper than somebody being racist or something like that. This shit is fucking weak. For anybody to say some stuff like that, it's just weak. Like, you're racist, you're this. Like, that is more of an example of who you are as an individual to say something like that. It's cheap is what it is. It's very cheap. So, kind of just rambling now. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I would suggest looking into this narcissistic family dynamic and start breaking this down like I've broken it down, and yeah, take it even higher, because this is it's a big thing. It's a big deal, and once people start to realize that Big Brother, the system itself, is the narcissistic parental unit, it doesn't take much to start to disassemble this stuff. Once you start doing the work from the inside out, all this politics and all this stuff, all the Marianne Williamson, that's external stuff. This is why she says love wins and I'm a spiritual candidate and all this other stuff. That's an external entity trying to appear to deal with internal things. What needs to happen internally. The system knows this, so the system is trying to co-opt the internal shift of consciousness by acting as if you can do an internal shift of consciousness outside of yourself. Not only outside of yourself, but through the codependent narcissistic program that has been going on for centuries now. Yep.